papers in his green-shadowed sanctuary, and the light shining down upon his smoked glasses created the odd illusion that he was looking over the tops of the lenses and not down at the table, as his attitude suggested. However, it was probably ascribable to the weird chiaroscuro of the scene, although it gave the seated figure an oddly malignant appearance, and I passed out through the utter darkness of the outer room to the front door. Smith opening it, I was conscious of surprise to find dusk come, to meet darkness where I had looked for sunlight. The silver wisps which had raced along the horizon as we came to Cragmire Tower had been harbingers of other and heavier banks. A stormy sunset smeared crimson streaks across the skyline, where a great range of clouds, like the oily smoke of a city burning, was banked, mountain topping mountain, and lighted from below by this angry red. As we came down the steps and out by the gate, I turned and looked across the moor behind us. A sort of reflection from this distant blaze encrimsoned the whole landscape. The inland bay glowed sullenly, as if internal fires and not reflected light were at work, a scene both wild and majestic. Nayland Smith was staring up at the cone-like top of the ancient tower in a curious, speculative fashion. Under the influence of our host's conversation, I had forgotten the reasonless dread which had touched me at the moment of our arrival, but now, with the red light blazing over Sedgemoor, as if in memory of the blood which had been shed there, and with the tower of unknown origin looming above me, I became very uncomfortable again. Nor did I envy Van Roon his eerie residence. The proximity of a tower of any kind, at night, makes in some inexplicable way for awe, and tonight there were other agents, too. "What's that?" snapped Smith suddenly, grasping my arm. He was peering southward, toward the distant hamlet, and starting violently at his words and the sudden grasp of his hand, I too stared in that direction. "We were followed, Petrie!" he almost whispered. "I never got a sight of our follower, but I swear we were followed. Look! There's something moving over yonder." Together we stood staring into the dusk. Then Smith burst abruptly into one of his rare laughs and clapped me upon the shoulder. "It's Hagar, the mulatto!" he cried, "and our grips! That extraordinary American with his tales of witch lights and haunted abbeys has been playing the devil with our nerves." Together we waited by the gate until the half-caste appeared on the bend of the path with a grip in either hand. He was a great muscular fellow with a stoic face, and, for the purpose of visiting Saul, presumably, he had doffed his white raiment and now wore a sort of livery with a peaked cap. Smith watched him enter the house, then "I wonder where Van Roon obtains his provisions and so forth," he muttered. "It's odd they knew nothing about the new tenant of Cragmire Tower at the Wagoners." There came a sort of sudden expectancy into his manner, for which I found myself at a loss to account. He turned his gaze inland and stood there, tugging at his left ear and clicking his teeth together. He stared at me, and his eyes looked very bright in the dusk, for a sort of red glow from the sunset touched them, and he spoke no word, merely taking my arm and leading me off on a rambling walk around and about the house. Neither of us spoke a word until we stood at the gate of Cragmire Tower again. Then "I swear now that we were followed here today," muttered Smith. The lofty place immediately within the doorway proved, in the light of a lamp now fixed in an iron bracket, to be a square entrance hall meagerly furnished. The closed study door faced the entrance, and on the left of it ascended an open staircase up which the mulatto led the way. We found ourselves on the floor above, in a corridor traversing the house from back to front. An apartment on the immediate left was indicated by the mulatto as that allotted to Smith. It was a room of fair size, furnished quite simply, but boasting a wardrobe cupboard, and Smith's grip stood beside the white enameled bed. I glanced around and then prepared to follow the man who had awaited me in the doorway. He still wore his dark livery, and as I followed the lithe, broad-shouldered figure along the corridor, I found myself considering critically his breadth of shoulder and the extraordinary thickness of his neck. I have repeatedly spoken of a sort of foreboding, an elusive stirring in the depths of my being of which I became conscious at certain times in my dealings with Dr. Fu-Manchu and his murderous servants. This sensation, or something akin to it, claimed me now, unaccountably, as I stood looking into the neat bedroom on the same side of the corridor but at the extreme end, wherein I was to sleep. A voiceless warning urged me to return, a kind of childish panic came fluttering about my heart, a dread of entering the room, of allowing the mulatto to come behind me. Doubtless this was no more than a subconscious product of my observations respecting his abnormal breadth of shoulder, but whatever the origin of the impulse, I found myself unable to disobey it. Therefore I merely nodded, turned on my heel, and went back to Smith's room. I closed the door, then turned to face Smith, who stood regarding me. "Smith," I said, "that man sends cold water trickling down my spine." Still regarding me fixedly, my friend nodded his head. "You are curiously sensitive to this sort of thing," he replied slowly. "I have noticed it before as a useful capacity. I don't like the look of the man myself. The fact that he's been in Van Roon's employ for some years goes for nothing. We are neither of us likely to forget Kwee, the Chinese servant of Sir Lionel Barton, and it's quite possible that Fu-Manchu has corrupted this man as he corrupted the other. It is quite possible..." His voice trailed off into silence, and we stood looking across the room with unseeing eyes, meditating deeply. It was quite dark now outside, as I could see through the uncurtained window, which opened upon the dreary expanse stretching out to haunted Sedgemoor. 2 candles were burning upon the dressing table. They were but recently lighted, and so intense was the stillness that I could distinctly hear the spluttering of one of the wicks, which was damp. Without giving the slightest warning of his intention, Smith suddenly made 2 strides forward, stretched out his long arms, and snuffed the pair of candles in a twinkling. The room became plunged in impenetrable darkness. "Not a word, Petrie!" whispered my companion. I moved cautiously to join him, but as I did so, perceived that he was moving too. Vaguely against the window I perceived him silhouetted. He was looking out across the moor, and "See! See!" he hissed. With my heart thumping furiously in my breast, I bent over him, and for the second time since our coming to Cragmire Tower, my thoughts flew to the Fenman. "There are shades in the fen, ghosts of women and men, who have sinned and died, but are living again. Over the waters they tread, with their lanterns of dread, and they peer in the pools of the dead." A light was dancing out upon the moor, a witch light that came and went unaccountably up and down, in and out, now clearly visible, now masked in the darkness. "Lock the door," snapped my companion, "if there's a key." I crept across the room and fumbled for a moment, then "There is no key," I reported. "Then wedge the chair under the knob and let no one enter until I return," he said amazingly. With that he opened the window to its fullest extent, threw his leg over the sill, and went creeping along a wide concrete ledge in which ran a leaded gutter in the direction of the tower on the right. Not pausing to follow his instructions respecting the chair, I craned out of the window, watching his progress, and wondering with what sudden madness he was bitten. Indeed, I could not credit my senses, could not believe that I heard and saw aright. Yet there out in the darkness on the moor moved the will o' the wisp, and 10 yards along the gutter crept my friend, like a great gaunt cat. Unknown to me, he must have prospected the route by daylight, for now I saw his design. The ledge terminated only where it met the ancient wall of the tower, and it was possible for an agile climber to step from it to the ledge of the unglazed window some 4 feet below, and to scramble from that point to the stone fence and thence on to the path by which we had come from Saul. This difficult operation Nayland Smith successfully performed, and, to my unbounded amazement, went racing into the darkness toward the dancing lights, headlong, like a madman. The night swallowed him up, and between my wonder and my fear my hands trembled so violently that I could scarce support myself where I rested, with my full weight upon the sill. I seemed now to be moving through the fevered phases of a nightmare. Around and below me Cragmire Tower was profoundly silent, but a faint odor of cookery was now perceptible. Outside, from the night, came a faint whispering as of the distant sea, but no moon and no stars relieved the impenetrable blackness. Only out over the moor the mysterious light still danced and moved. 1, 2, 3, 4... 5 minutes passed. The light vanished and did not appear again. 5 more age-long minutes elapsed in absolute silence, whilst I peered into the darkness of the night and listened, every nerve in my body tense, for the return of Nayland Smith. Yet 2 more minutes, which embraced an agony of suspense, passed in the same fashion. Then a shadowy form grew, phantomesque, out of the gloom. A moment more, and I distinctly heard the heavy breathing of a man nearly spent, and saw my friend scrambling up toward the black embrasure in the tower. His voice came huskily, pantingly. Creep along and lend me a hand, Petrie.